In school days, opposite the girls' school, I used to have class quite often because of doing strange subjects. We had St. Peter's Roman Catholic Church, which had the advantage of always being opened. And right as you prayed, you couldn't help but see this scene in the beautiful stained glass window over the high altar. It was the bark, the boat of Simon Peter, and the Lord was sitting comfortably teaching the crowds in a place where he couldn't be squashed but could be heard and seen by all. It was as this gospel has been understood by the centuries. The bark of Peter. It's rather like Noah's Ark. Outside the church, there is no salvation. That was defined by Boniface VIII. And understood correctly, it is always true. For all salvation comes through Calvary, the precious blood, and the merits of it are applied through our Holy Mother, the Church. And any application outside its visible parameters are through an extension of the arms of our Mother, the Church, trying all she can to embrace every bit of humanity before he dies. And we are in the game. And Old Nick knows it. And so he will destroy the game. He will rock the boat. And he will rock anyone who is doing what he should be doing. The Church has three principal roles: teaching, and therefore he'll make sure that the truth is not taught, and silence the mouths of anyone who dares to utter it. Sanctifying, the sacramental system, and governing. In a famous exorcism in the States about a century ago, it was an interesting conversation going on between Beelzebul and Father Theophilus. And it turned out that Beelzebul was there by order of Lucifer, and that there was a perfect order down under. And of course, they never sleep, but we doze. And he will destroy the governing order by division from within. So don't get into the game. Use your tongue and pen positively. But I want to stay with the sanctifying role for a few seconds. The sacramental system. There was a case some years ago of a Protestant who was told by a Catholic friend of his to go to an open Catholic church where there was adoration going on and sit there. And he had a mystical experience where he was shown the state of his soul and given to understand that if he died at that point, he'd be an awful mess. And it was so strongly impressed upon him that he felt he was going to die. His heart was stopping beating. He was in an awful crisis, and it was death or life. So he came back to his friend and explained the strange experience he'd had. He'd been told this too, that to have healing in his conscience, he'd have to have access to a Roman Catholic priest. He could also get it, he was given to understand, from a Greek priest. And by the way, this is a big day in the whole Eastern Orthodox Church. Massive in some countries, a big social event even, all day. It's Pentecost, because they're after us with Easter. The Holy Ghost is very important in the East. We need to recuperate something of their devotion. I'll come back to that in a second. But it was given to understand that in practice only the Roman Catholic priest could be accessible in his situation. It was sorted, but I want to come to this point. The Catholic Church is not a club or an institute. It is the mystical body with the authority and power of its head, correctly applied and in order. Now, there could well be in this assembly one or two who are being called to be part of that. I mean, in the sacred priesthood. And if they are, don't turn a blind eye or a deaf ear. Because if you are called, there'll be no deep peace elsewhere, no matter what the cost. Peace is not on the outside, but in the inside. And those who are called secretly know it. I think they will know what I mean if they're being nudged by that same Holy Ghost. Listen, be still. Because old Nick doesn't want it. You're a nuisance. And now I want to say why. I want just for a moment to pause on one sacrament, right now under huge attack. And the attack is favoured by the COVID. I'm having people coming to me these days who have not been to confession, even though they would normally go very regularly, for a couple of years because it was just not available. And so massively in Ireland, people have not had confession for quite a long time. So there's grime on the souls of the Irish Catholic. It's not going to help the life of the Church. Now, with regard to this sacrament, the great exorcist of Rome, the late Gabriel Amort, had a lot to say. And this in particular is noticeable. He clearly said, and he knew what he was talking about, that the sacrament of confession is more powerful than exorcism, because he maintained and he knew they were washed in the blood of the Lamb, and the devil hated it for that reason and was obliged to admit it in exorcism, how much he hated this sacrament. Now, to make sure that it doesn't happen, or if it happens badly, Old Nick has a few tricks, and I want you to be aware of them. 1. Make sure that they never get to the point. Make sure they talk a lot. That has a huge advantage. They'll forget the essential and the big sins that had to be confessed. And also, they make it impossible for anyone else to come to confession. Or if so, they'll be frustrated and be sinning in anger while they wait. So if in an assembly you come to confession, when there are people waiting, remember 3 points. Get to the point, stick to the point, and get off the point and let someone else get to his point. Because if not, you're sinning by spiritual selfishness. And it can happen more than you think. Why? People are glad to have attention. They've got a lot to share. And the priest normally has been taught the basic rules of courtesy, so he'll not interrupt. He might drop a few hints, and the hints will get stronger, and they become clangers of hints, and they'll still be talking about some family problem, confessing other people's sins, while other people are sinning in frustration while they wait. Be generous in your confession, for your own soul's sake, because the more you talk, the less you get to the point, and stick to it. What is the point? Of obligation, grave matter. What is grave matter? Look at the commandments and look if there's full consent and full knowledge. But now, people are coming and talking about all kinds of secondary issues, and they're actually going away without having brushed even big issues which should be confessed. If you don't believe me, listen to this. There was a noble lady who was exceedingly pious. And she asked God to make known to her what displeased His Divine Majesty most in persons of her sex. The Lord vouchsafed in a miraculous manner to hear her. He opened her eyes to the eternal abyss. There she saw a woman, a prey to cruel torments, and in her recognized one of her friends, a short time before deceased. This sight caused her as much astonishment as grief. The person whom she saw damned did not seem to her to have lived badly. Then that unhappy soul said to her, "It is true, true that I practiced religion, but I was a slave of vanity, ruled by the passion to please. I was not afraid to adopt indecent fashions to attract attention, and I kindled the fire of impurity in more than one heart. Ah, she says from where she is, and remember where that is, she's still there. If Christian women knew how much immodesty in dress displeases God, who ever confesses that? So just be aware that God has a different balance. And when one moment after death we see things as they are, that's the only one that counts. Rather like the soul in the scales in the high cross of Monaster Boyce, a little bit nervous, not knowing which way the scales will tip, with an angel at one end and a demon at the other, and he is completely naked, and no matter how much attention he had, there's nothing there but his naked soul. Now, confession is there to avert that shock, and if we don't use it, we've got a big rethink one moment after we die. And it's not therefore the time to be reporting on other people's faults or talking about various bits of news. It's the point at which you are before the Alpha and the Omega, represented by the priest. And don't think the priest will be shocked. He's heard it all before 1,000 times. Nothing shocks a priest. So say the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And if you don't, you get into the problem of sacrilege, because deliberately hidden sins are not absolved. So let the confession be short, honest, to the point, and complete with regard to the main sins. Now, don't go into scruple either, because it's not to trust in the mercy of God. Our faith is such that we have the King of Kings on side, and we rejoice that we've got mercy. I just conclude. There are two confessions, in nature. One is the confession that brings back the soul from darkness to light, from mortal sin to a state of grace, and that has to be, as far as possible, complete. The other is devotional, and it's what we handle with devout souls, e.g. in a monastery, a convent. And there, it's rather like the difference between a GP and a surgeon. It's spiritual surgery, and you have to listen very carefully for all the nuances. Why? At that point, you're leading little angels quite often to a higher degree of glory and intimacy with their King. And that grace is very important. And the more we receive it, the more we receive this sacrament, the more we have of an injection of grace. And only it knows it. And by the way, it's now 40 years since, I believe, Our Lady started to appear at Medjugorje. And you know that one thing that she told them from the beginning, when she started to appear on the Feast of St. John the Baptist in 1981, she wanted two things especially. Fasting, because she said it's completely disappeared, practically from the Western world, compared with the East, and regular confession. And she gave a rhythm every month for normal people, but every week for young people, because they are more exposed to occasions of sin. So, once a week for a young person is not abnormal. It's his insurance policy, because the devil loves to get the youth, and he's got amazing means of getting them. Look at them, completely absorbed by a screen, and all that comes out of it. All the demons of impurity and distraction. Where is God among the youth? Out of the window. And he'll be met only 1 second after death, when it wasn't in time to save the immortal soul, when they could have, over a long life of regular use of this sacrament of healing. I just conclude. In Italy, we have old confession boxes, some very old. We were using one built in 1693 or something, written on it. We were still using them. And the confessions were quick and to the point. You couldn't see the person, but you gave absolution. That's all you wanted. But I remember talking to one good priest who had just had his church renewed. He kept the old confession box perché aveva sentito tutti I peccati. The old box had heard all the sins of the centuries. And I looked at the box and I thought, what can happen in a little box?